Welcome back, everybody. Today is day 2 of Career Week, and I am your host, Ann Dolan. Yesterday, we talked about how AI is shaping the landscape when it comes to young adults, recent college grads applying for a job. But today, we're going to go a little bit deeper, and we're actually going to get inside a recruiter's mind. You're going to walk away knowing exactly what raises red flags, what your student or new grad can do right now, and how their application can actually be seen by that person who might hire them. I'm super excited to have Jen Prenier here with me today. Jen has nearly a decade of experience in recruiting, hiring, and HR management. She's reviewed thousands of applications, she's led hundreds of interviews, and now she leads our nationwide recruitment for our educators here at Educational Connections. Jen has an MBA and a BS in business management. Jen, welcome.
Thank you, Anne. I'm really excited to be here today.
Well, I am glad you're here today as well. So it is so true. I know that first impressions really matter when it comes to your application. What are some red flags recruiters notice from the get-go?
Sure. So, across the many resumes that I've reviewed, really the most common red flags that I see are ones that are super easy to fix. And they're things like typos or simple grammatical errors or sloppy formatting, and sometimes just not complete information. And I know that that sounds like common sense, but truly, when you've been staring at your own resume for hours on end, and I've done this before too, you just start to miss those little things because you know what you want it to say or what you want it to look like. But those little details really do matter. And I've even seen some silly mistakes like people forgetting to capitalize their names on their resumes. And so when I
Uh-oh.
have, yeah, when I have, and I know they know to do that, but it's just, again, those little details. When I have, 50 applicants that all meet the skills requirement of the position I'm hiring for, something that small of just not capitalizing your name, that can be the difference between whether someone gets an interview or doesn't. And that's really because they are indicating a bigger picture. They're showing me that maybe that candidate lacks attention to detail or that they were rushing through applications, so maybe they aren't that interested in my position. Or it might be that they don't have the best written communication skills, which might mean that if they were hired, their manager might have to double check their work a lot. So really just taking the time to thoroughly proofread, but definitely have someone else look at your resume also to pick up on those things that you're missing. I think that could really help eliminate some of those simple red flags that I see a lot.
That really makes sense. And I'm sure that there's also things that you expect to see. What are those?
Yeah, definitely. So, pretty much across the board for any job you're applying to, there's always a few sort of logistical things that you want to have on your resume or application. With, starting off with a professional email address. And personally, I recommend using something that contains your first name or first initial and your last name, something that's going to be identifiable and not something like John Boy 2000, or maybe it has your name in it, but it sounds a little less professional. You also want to make sure to include your city and state. You do not need to put your full street address on there anymore. I have seen that a number of times. But this is actually really important, especially if you're applying to jobs in neighboring states or for remote work, because there might be restrictions on where companies can hire from. And then finally, no matter what platform you're applying on, if it's Indeed, LinkedIn, via email, please, you want to make sure your resume and your cover letter are saved with your name in the title. You don't want it to just say my cover letter or January resume. You want it to say, Jane Doe 2026 resume. So it's super quick for the recruiter to identify whose resume belongs to whom.
Yeah, that makes sense. I have seen so many resumes where I'll say like updated resume,
Yeah.
and that's not always helpful. All right, so tell me a little bit more. What about the job details?
Yes, the job details, that work section, a lot of people think that's the most important section, and it is very important. So you want to have clear job titles and relevant job details. You really want your resume to clearly state what you did as it relates to the position you're applying for. And something I don't think a lot of people think about is that sometimes it's okay to tweak the job title on your resume so it's clear what you did. And let me give you an example. So several years ago, I was working for a company that hired a lot of new college graduates. And on one of the applications there was a job title of scoopologist at a local takeout restaurant, and there were no job details underneath it. And I had no idea what that was. I did end up reaching out to them, and when I was talking with them later on, they explained that they worked at the ice cream counter. And while it's a fun title to be a scoopologist and scoop ice cream, if I hadn't taken the time to follow up, I would never have known that it was a customer service role responsible for handling monetary transactions. And those were skills that were directly related to the job that they were applying for. So had they put, customer service associate and then put some details underneath it, that would have been much clearer. And in today's tough job market, where recruiters are receiving hundreds of applications a day, those little details can definitely make all the difference.
Yeah, that makes sense. Scoopologist for sure. I've never heard that term. It's cute,
Yeah,
but you're right. And especially if that job has things like closing out the cash drawer, if you were one of the people responsible for closing up shop at the end of the night, just by putting scoopologist, that wouldn't be so impressive. But those other details, upselling a single to a double, like little things like that, I
exactly.
would see as attractive.
Exactly.
All right, so let's talk about the resume. You always mention that simple is helpful, but that you also need certain things. What should be on the resume?
Yeah, great question. The point of the resume is to really highlight your skills and your experiences and any achievements that are related to the position you're applying for. You're not just listing every single job task you've ever done, but you also want to make sure that it's done in a way that's easy and quick to read, again, because recruiters are receiving so many applications. And sometimes they're reviewing applications in a matter of seconds. And I know that sounds scary. So, what I always recommend is to cut anything that might be a long paragraph or really anything that's in a full, fluffy paragraph form that overly explains the tiny tasks. Instead, you want to use consistent formatting, bold the section headers like work experience, education, so it's clear to the recruiter what they're looking at, and use concise bullet points that are really highlighting the experiences for that job, pulling those words directly from the job description. So if it's a teaching role or a sales role, you're looking at the job description and pulling the words that they use, like instructing or upselling, as opposed to words that might differ a little bit, and using those in your bullet points, and also showing concrete outcomes. So, like you said, really the aim is to be simple, relevant, and readable.
And how long? What would you recommend for the length of a resume?
I would say for most current college students or recent college grads, your resume should fit on about one page.
Okay. And what if you don't even have enough information to fill a page? You're really
Sure.
young, you may have had one internship or a couple of summer jobs.
Yeah, absolutely. A resume does not have to just be all about your jobs. Especially as a college student or recent grad, you can definitely include sections like relevant coursework, clubs or organizations, especially if you had any sort of leadership role, community service, anything that would demonstrate those transferable skills to the job you're applying for.
Okay, helpful. Okay, awesome. So let's turn from the resume to the cover letter because I know this is still a thing that cover letters are still really valuable and important. Tell us about that.
Yes, cover letters are still incredibly important, especially for current college students or recent grads who, to your point, may not have a lot of workplace experience in the traditional setting. Some jobs might require a cover letter, but a lot of them mark it as optional now. And I really recommend, if you are applying for a job and you see that it gives you the option to add a cover letter, then absolutely add one. It is a place to add additional information about you and really show your personality. Very often I see cover letters that are just sort of restating everything that's on the resume, but they put it in sentence format. So they're just listing out the jobs they held and the tasks they've done. But that isn't really adding value because it's already on the resume. So in the cover letter, you really want to highlight a specific achievement or a specific skill, and how you used that in a previous position or leadership role or community service again. This is also, you're going to show off your writing skills and your personality. It still needs to be relevant to applying to the job you're applying to. But again, if you don't have a lot of workplace experience, the cover letter is the perfect place to explain how those skills that you do have are transferable. And I know when we work with students, when our career coach Britt works with students, we help them determine exactly what should go on their resume and then what they can elaborate on or share more about in their cover letter.
Yeah, I would think that's super helpful because at first it's, really overwhelming. I was talking to a friend of mine recently and his friend um, said, "Oh, hey, I have this opportunity, internship opportunity available at my engineering firm." And my friend said, "Oh gosh, that would be really awesome for my son." So he went back to his son and he said, "Hey, Joseph, that's not his name, but hey, Joseph, get your resume ready so I can send it to my friend." And he just couldn't do it. Like he was just so stuck because
Yeah.
it does feel overwhelming to kids. And even though he was using Claude and ChatGPT, he just didn't know it was important. So to your point, like having somebody else, not just help you, but also that accountability partner can be super helpful when you're stuck like that and you're not sure what a recruiter wants to see. So along those lines, I know you're a big believer in having some type of data in your resume and definitely your cover letter. What is this formula?
Yeah, so I really like to see actions, outcomes, and that data whenever possible because it really shows the recruiter your skills, not just tells them what you did. So, for an example, let's go back to that scoopologist position. Instead of saying something like, I served ice cream to customers, they could say, prepared orders efficiently for over 50 customers per shift to maintain high customer satisfaction, or processed $1,000 of cash and card payments per day and completed end of shift registered closeout to maintain accurate sales records. I know that sounds wordy when you say it like that, but what it's really showing me is they're not just saying, I ran a cash register. They're backing that up with the data to really prove to me that they did those things. They're telling me exactly what actions they took and what those outcomes were. So it's very clear to me what they were actually doing in that role.
And it also sounds like their employer trusted them. If you're putting somebody in charge of that, I would think as a recruiter, like, wow, that's somebody I want who's already done these things and whose employer thought that they were trustworthy enough to have this role. So let's talk a little bit about some of these additional questions that might be asked, like screening questions. What are these? And, how can kids get around them when they think they may not be qualified for a job?
Sure. So the screening questions are kind of like the first line of defense for a recruiter, and they're made to help us filter out applications who just definitely do not meet the non-negotiable job requirements. But like you said, it's common that new college grads or young adults can kind of get stuck in this step. And a common mistake that I see is applicants not answering all of the screening questions, especially if they see the word optional, or they are answering them, but they're just kind of giving vague or sort of canned responses, or saying what they think the recruiter wants to hear. The screening questions are actually a really good place to stand out. And whether you're answering them during the application process or you've been contacted after you applied and are asked some additional questions, you really want to treat every piece of communication like it's part of the interview, because it really is. You want to answer all of the questions, including the optional ones. You also want to make sure that you're honest and give specific and relevant info. If a question is asking you to explain your experience with, like a type of software, and you don't have that particular experience, and that could be common for our young adults, you don't want to leave that question blank or just put none. You still want to write a response, be professional, and you might give them a relatable skill. So, although I do not have experience with this particular software, I'm very comfortable using similar programs such as enlist something else that you are familiar with, and I'm confident I could learn to use your software quickly. So you're not just showing them your great communication skills, but you're also showing them that you have adjacent skills. And I just want to say, and too, I know I've said relevant probably like 100 times today, but it really is so important that everything on the application or resume or cover letter is translating to the skills and experience from the job description. Because when you get into the AI pieces and also for the recruiter themselves, they're looking for what's matching that job description.
So are you saying that sometimes the AI screening process can kick out people that may actually be required, be,
It's it definitely can. And I think that this happens a lot because students aren't always thinking about their transferable skills or skills that maybe don't seem as black and white as what the job description's asking for. And so just to kind of give you an example, you a lot of college students or even high school students work as a lifeguard during
mhm.
when they're in the summer or while they're in school. And if they're, a lifeguard and then they are applying for sales roles later, I think it's really easy to think, oh, I don't have any experience relevant to this sales role. And this is something that our career coach also can help with is just thinking through the tasks that you did in a job and finding that connecting piece. Because as a lifeguard, you are working with people all day. You are dealing with stressful situations. You are, multitasking and jumping through a lot of different hoops. And those are all skills that are relevant to a sales role. And I think it's really important that students don't undersell themselves or count themselves out before they even, get through the application process.
Especially if in that lifeguarding role, maybe they manage other people or,
Exactly.
right? That's pretty common as you've worked at some place for a couple of summers, you have a greater leadership position.
Yeah,
And I think that would
definitely.
be attractive. Awesome. Makes sense, Jen. All right. So let's move on to the interview. You often say that prep beats polish. What does that mean?
Yes. So I know interviews can be intimidating. And really, the goal of the interview is not to scare the candidate, it's to really get to know them on a deeper level than just what they put on that paper. But we are looking that to see that they are prepared. Are they prepared for the interview? Are they prepared for the job? So when there are, several applicants that might have comparable skills, the decision often can come down to that personality fit and how you present yourself in that interview. And really, who's going to fit with the rest of the team and really be invested in the position in the company. So, yeah, my top three tips for interviewing are to be prepared, be authentic, and then follow up. You don't want to go into an interview without having reviewed the job description, the company website. You want to be familiar with what they do, what their mission is, and what the job is that you're applying for. Another thing is to be prepared with what's on your resume. Again, when you've been looking at your resume for so long, you think you know what's on there, but they may ask specific questions about a job on your resume or tasks on your resume. So just making sure you actually know what your resume says. And all of these things are going to really show that you're interested and invested in the company. And then again, just being confident. Don't short sell yourself, and practice. I think that's probably something that a lot of young adults might not think of is an interview is testing your communication skills. And it's also testing your critical thinking or your processing. How fast can you answer questions or think up examples? These are skills that you can practice and grow. And this is something that our career coach helps with all the time. And then finally, like I said, follow up. Following up after the interview with just a quick thank you email to the recruiter or the interviewer, again, it just shows that you're really thoughtful and intentional in your processes and interested in the position.
Jen, what if the candidate doesn't even get to the interview stage? They're qualified, they think they'd be great at the job, but they don't even get an interview.
Sure. So this is incredibly frustrating, and this job market is tough because I feel like this is happening all the time. You're sending out resumes and you're thinking like, "Oh, I'd be the perfect fit for this job," and then you hear nothing. And again, it's totally okay to follow up and reach out. If it's been a week or so and you haven't heard anything from the recruiter at all, send them a quick email that states you're still interested in the position, asking if there's any update or maybe if they need any more information from you. Again, it's going to show continued interest. Now, this does work better for small or medium-sized businesses, people that you either have a direct contact through Indeed or LinkedIn, wherever you applied, or you can find their information on the company website. Totally okay to contact them that way. And then I want to share a pro tip too, Anne. If anyone attended our webinar yesterday, you might know that a lot of recruiters use AI systems to pre-screen applications, and sometimes those systems automatically reject candidates before they've ever been seen by a recruiter. But the rejection message is kind of paused for usually 2 or 3 days before it goes out to the applicant so that it kind of gives this sense of, oh, maybe they're reviewing my application. So even if you've received a rejection email, and especially if it seems like it was generic or automated, if you have contact information, reach out then also. And I want to give a specific example because I know this can kind of sound weird, like, well, they've already rejected me. Why would I reach out again? But I recently had somebody reach out to me via email and say they had received a rejection email for a job they had applied to, and just asking if I could provide any information for how they could be a stronger candidate if they wanted to apply again in the future, because they were really interested in the company. And then when I went and pulled up their application, I realized I had never seen it because it had been automatically rejected by the AI filters. So I read their resume and cover letter. They actually sounded like a really good fit. So we invited them to an interview and we ended up hiring them. So if she had never reached out, I would never have even seen her application. So anytime that you can follow up or find a real person to talk to, definitely I would recommend doing it.
Wow, that is such a good pro tip, Jen. Thank you so much for that and for sharing that example. And if we can help your young adult or your college student, whether they're looking for an internship, their first job out of college, or they already have a job and they're looking to shift gears, we're happy to help. We work on career exploration, networking, professional presence. And sometimes kids are doing a lot of that, but they don't have the way to track everything, to follow through, making sure they're on track. So that accountability system. And then, of course, helping them to use AI correctly in their job search. And we're happy to talk to you. Go to our website, ectutoring.com. There's a drop-down menu at the top that says career coaching, and let us know if you want to chat. And we're happy to hear about your young adult and share a bit about the information for our program. All right, so we have a question. Is there a best font type and size for resume and cover letters? And resumes or and and resume
Oh,
or
should they use
resume?
the accent
Should they
mark?
use the accent? Mhm.
Great question. So for font type and size, I mean, you want to keep it pretty standard. So usually 10, 11, or 12 font size using a crisp, clean font like Calibri or Arial. I probably said that one wrong. Um, as long as it's consistent and not something that it might be hard to read, or you don't want to use any of like the handwriting format ones. So something that's crisp, clean, easy to read, 10 to 12 font size. Sometimes you might use, a slightly larger font size if you want to make it the formatting look crisp on a whole page, or a smaller to make it all fit on a page. As long as it's still readable, that's really the key. And as for using the accent marks, personally, I don't really think it matters. If you want to use the accent marks, great, but you can't save accent marks into the title of like a PDF or a Word document, so it's not going to be in there anyways. And I feel like you can go either way, but I don't think it's required.
Thanks, Jen. And that was super helpful. All right, everybody, as we wrap up, I want to share that tomorrow we're talking about building identity capital and getting your foot in the door even when you don't have experience. And Britt will be joining us for that one. I hope this was helpful to everyone. It was great to have you on today, and I look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Have a great day, everybody, and thank you, Jen.
Thank you, Anne.